Coolio. Right then. First of all, thank you very much for agreeing to do this. Really appreciate it. I was looking back actually because I was thinking we must have first met probably 15 years ago. Do you think?
Yeah, it's worrying how little you've changed. You probably remember me before I grew my hair in the flesh.
Yeah. It's like it's going full circle.
Yeah. Outrageous behaviour. But,
yeah, well, this is like an exclusive.
No, absolutely. Well, I suppose I first met you because I'd started doing the low vision clinics at City. So, I mean, do you want me to just go for it? So,
yeah.
So there's Bill Harvey. Yeah. So I first studied at Aston. I'm a brummie, and then got the job down to the pre-reg at Moorfields, which is where I first got interested in the low vision aspect. And then worked there a couple of years, then had to earn some proper money, and then worked in high street opticians full time for about as long as I possibly could bear it. And so after about the first year, I did what I've done ever since, and that's take on a variety of jobs, which I do part of the time, just to, I suppose, assuage my ADHD, as my kids would say. So I went back to City, where I did some lecturing and got involved in the low vision clinic there, which was quite useful, having had the Moorfields experience. And so that's really where it started. But the other thing I did then was I did some research on communication skills and the implications upon clinical interaction, which increasingly has stood me in good stead, because I reckon over the last however many years, 25 years, I've moved from this need to give out magnifiers based on ray diagrams and formulae to a massive, absolute 100% belief in that what most people need when they lose their sight is information given in a way that they understand, positive and reassuring. So that whole bit I did years ago on communication skills and its implications actually has sort of borne itself out to be quite true. So over the years since then, I've taken on various things. I think most people probably know me from the optician job, the magazine, so clinical editor of that. Did some many years working for Boots, mainly doing their pre-reg and CET. But in recent years, I've sort of gone back to my old favourite again. So I'm now visiting one of the visiting clinicians at the RNIB Centre in London, where we do obviously low vision assessment, but also look at care for people with learning impairment or post-neurological concerns like post-stroke, that sort of thing. Get to do some dummies, get to do some working with rehab, get to work with some social services, and it's great. So that, I suppose, is a reasonable overview. Still do a bit of teaching. I've just had to learn how to do recorded PowerPoints to send off to the various courses that I teach on, which are a blooming, he said carefully, nightmare. Because unlike giving a live lecture where you can sort of go into one, if it's being recorded for people to listen at home doing courses remotely, you have to be absolutely careful that everything is not only accurate, but there's nothing that could be viewed as litigious or libelous, and that you get sued for. So I was amazed how much time it took. So my life, I suppose, at the moment has necessarily changed quite a bit. So the clinics are in lockdown and the teaching is done remotely, but the magazine has gone bonkers because everybody wants CET and information. So all good, but all changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that cover it?
No. Well, how does it? Yeah, exactly. No, that totally works. How does it work then with regards to the remote lectures and so on? Presumably, if they're going to keep doing that students are still going to be having to pay fees as if they were actually attending. So, yeah, I'm just kind of curious. What's your thought on sort of the value that you're giving to them sort of by
I have a personal bias here because upstairs, as we speak, is my 19-year-old.
Oh, wow, right.
Who's at university, and he's not only obviously been sent home, but it's looking increasingly as if the second year, and lots of his mates as well, have been told that their fees are going to stay the same, but it will all be done remotely. He's got a friend who's worked her socks off to get into Cambridge, and instead of the Brideshead Revisited experience, she's going to be stuck in a bedroom for a year looking at online PowerPoints and so on.
Wow.
I think it will get better. I think that the Open University for years has proved that you can remotely learn successfully. And I think things like optometry, where there's a clinical aspect, there's got to be carefully designed practical sessions, because, you know, if you're not getting experience dealing with patients, you're not going to be a very good optom. So I think things will change. And also, a lot of these, like we're doing now, which one's this? This is Zoom, isn't it? I mean, have you noticed over the last month how much better these have got?
Yeah, big time. Yeah.
Loading, handing out questions. Just done a Heidelberg one about an hour ago. It was advertising. Be careful how you use it.
That's fine.
And I love that little put your hand up button. Have you seen it? Just simple but great. So, I personally don't think any higher education should be paid for by the person. It should be all funded out of taxation, and higher education should be a human right, not a luxury. So I think whether it's done remotely or by being there present, I don't think it makes a difference to my overall argument, which is universities are not businesses, they're hallowed teaching academies. So
absolutely.
I think, if anything, more people will complain about the current setup, because paying 15 grand to watch some PowerPoints ain't good value for money, mate. So maybe that'll be the spur for you to think about their funding.
Definitely. And I think also, because I'm right in saying, aren't I, that if it's not this, it's got to be around this sort of universities, like a third of their income comes from tuition. So it's kind of
absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, I think a lot of that, I think a big chunk of that third, if I remember rightly, is from overseas students as well, going to the sort of Big Ten. But particularly with our current performance in terms of health strategy, that's just dried up. So I think we're going to lose a few universities in the next year. They will actually go bankrupt because they are run as businesses now. I think the Oxfords and Cambridges and the Durhams will always be fine. But I think there will be a need to look at new funding sources. And who knows, the government might actually retract a little bit like they did with the railways and nationalise a little bit more as well. But we've got such a funny bunch in at the moment. You know, you can't hold your breath for anything, really.
Yeah, well, this is it. So, okay. So coming back to sort of low vision then, I'm just kind of curious, what would you say? So if somebody's kind of, say, newly registered, what's kind of the biggest challenges that they sort of face? Because a lot of sort of conversations that we're having with people, and part of the reason for having these sort of chats is to sort of spread the word and get information out there about services that people maybe aren't aware of with that whole postcode lottery thing. But if somebody's kind of newly registered sort of in the area that you look after, what do you think are sort of the initial, like the biggest challenges for them?
Well, I think a lot of them are historical, and I think there are quite a few, to be honest with you. So I think one of the first things, which again, we're going to touch on some controversial topics here, young Mark.
That's fine.
The way optometry is taught at the moment, most of the university degree courses are very well structured, but there is a significant lack of patient contact. So most people will then enter their pre-reg year, which is only of a limited time, without much patient experience. And then often in high street primary care community, where most pre-reg years are, they will struggle to get any low vision experience. I'm also one of the college assessors, and I can hand on heart say that the low vision competencies are the ones that most pre-regs struggle to get. And for reasonable reasons, a lot of the hospitals are quite reluctant to let students or pre-regs sit in on sessions with what could be viewed as some of our more vulnerable members of society. So unless you've done a hospital pre-reg, it is quite difficult getting that initial experience together. I think historically there's always been an over emphasis on the physics, if you like, of working out magnification and sight. But that has gradually changed, thankfully. But the way it's changed is that there has now been a recognition that a lot of what you're doing is building up a much bigger picture and coming up with a care plan. And that means that, yes, you need to develop your skills at talking to some people who are either emotionally very distraught, they've not yet come to accept any of their sensory loss, or, let's be honest, can be some of the most nightmarishly difficult people you're ever likely to meet. So your skills of empathy are pushed to the limit. And just looking back over my last 20 years, I'd say that that's one of those things, you develop a thick skin over time. And so asking somebody who's not really had much experience dealing with a very upset and high expectation and demanding person, it is quite a challenge. And to finish that bit, and again, this is important, the best approach to low vision is necessarily multidisciplinary. So I'm quite lucky in that RNIB centre, because it sort of works, it's got the contracts for both the Camden and the Islington CCGs. So we link in with the rehab workers. We've also got access to the sensory team at the hospitals, and we've also social services as well. So it's possible to actually develop a care plan that isn't just refraction and lighting.
Yeah.
Now, that isn't necessarily easy, depending on where you work, but also just because of the nature of our jobs. When you qualify, you often will take one of the most available jobs where the focus is not spending time outside the delivering a refractive correction product, if that's as careful as I think I could put it. So, recommending a specific light for a specific purpose, or spending time showing somebody how to use a Kindle, for example, is of no benefit in many places to the person who's paying your wage bill. There where you look at the sort of the facilities for you to do that, perhaps in your spare time or on your day off, and develop those skills, there's not that many resource centres dotted around that aren't either already being operated from purely charitable status without any clinical input, or just done perhaps of a more commercial bent. We can sell you a Kindle. So I think it is an odd one, and though I think things have improved, all I would say is that the challenges are easily outweighed by the benefits of getting involved in this area of work. Yeah. Because, if you've got a bit of a gob on you and you do annoy yourself into inveigling your way into a local scheme or service, then very quickly you start to see some people who you really do feel as if you have made some sort of difference for. And that fulfillment you get from it easily outweighs what our initial challenges, but those challenges don't go away. I don't know if this is a secret or not, but our CCP contracts are tendered only on an annual or biannual basis. So we've only just been told that we've got another year at that centre. It shouldn't be like that. But, people are looking at local health funding. That's going to be in demand at the moment. So should money be spent on somebody helping rearrange their flat so granny can walk around without killing herself, or maybe that money should be towards that extra hip operation down at the hospital. I don't think the challenges are ever going to go away.
No, and I suppose also things you mentioned there, sort of like there's like multidisciplinary, you've got disciplines going on. And I guess a big change is going to be, you mentioned there things like Kindles, and I guess over even probably the last 5 years, there must have been a demand and sort of people asking you questions about things like, how do I use my iPad? Because technology is becoming in part of everybody's life.
Well, I think this is a massive area, and I thought that this might be one of the main focuses of this chat, because for quite some time now, I've been quite surprised about I used to make a joke about it in lectures that the UK is filled with people with chests of drawers with hand magnifiers gathering dust somewhere underneath the underwear. And it's not because necessarily they're being foisted upon somebody. It's often because there's been an expectation that that is what happens when you lose your sight. And contrary to what some people's stereotypes are, most old people are far more interesting, far more naughty, cheeky, and have done things that would make most students blush. But they're generally all right. And so they'll accept these magnifiers because they think they're doing, you know, oh, Mr. Harvey gave me a hand magnifier. So I took it because he's a nice man. I thought I didn't want to upset him. Completely of no use to them. Whereas, you know, pre-digital revolution, I worked out that just having a really good chat with somebody and reinforcing a positive approach and lighting, more lighting and discussing lighting and more lighting and discussing about lighting. And my prescribing of hardware, optical hardware, just went down and down and down and down. It wasn't in any textbooks or anything. It just seemed to me that if you try using anything other than a 6 diopter hand mag, you're getting a slightly variable, blurred, restricted field of view with colour fringes, and your arm hurts. I mean, what's the good of that? So, I suppose, you know, it's you're involved with this one, so it's about that time you used to pop into City. Even then, some of the early electronic aids, they were starting to show promise. But it was about the same time that digital cameras were, you know, getting cheaper. And I think it's one of those areas where, again, I'll happily confess that I think I've learned as much from patients as I have from lecturers or from my own research or whatever, because it's been quite impressive over the years how people with significantly reduced sight have actually themselves discovered something that they've come in proudly to show me. I mean, back to those days, I got this camera for Christmas. It's a little Samsung, but there's a nice screen on it. And I've noticed that if I photograph a price and then press this mag button, the price, and I'd say, oh, well, you should talk to my mate Mark, because there's other fancy But I suppose that sort of, in recent years, has now driven to the point where I don't think we should think in terms of simple and complex low vision aids anymore. Because in the old days, as you know, complex was either telescopic or what they rather glibly called CCTV. Clearly, that's no longer the case. I would suggest now that a simple magnification device is something that, in an easy to carry, simple to use, and hopefully not too expensive device, can present a magnified image, which really, if you look at the resolution of pretty well even the cheapest of smartphones, tablets, I've got just out of sight there, I've got a Samsung tablet. I think it's about 50 quid, and download a free app on that, which will give you up to 15-20 times mag. It'll do reverse contrast. It'll even, if you go for a different app linked to a book, give you audio speech of a. The other change is that the people who are old now and losing their sight are all the ones that started the damage in the 60s. So they're not necessarily as technophobic as they were when I first qualified, which was obviously the first post-war generation. So whereas my mum is still scared of DVDs as the devil's work, there's just as many people, like 5 years younger than her now, who happily have been operating computers for years and love what's available. So I think, just to finish this bit off without waffling too much, I think when I met you recently, and most of us at RNIB Clinic have agreed on this, I think most of our consultations now would automatically include in the history and symptoms something that 5 years ago you just wouldn't have dreamt of. You know, just the way now generally people ask about smoking, general optometry, I'd always ask about now. So what have you got at the moment? Have you got a smartphone? Can we have a look at it? Do you use a tablet at home or a Kindle, or have you got access to a computer? Invariably, and this is fairly socioeconomically neutral as well, so whatever people's backgrounds are, they usually say yes to this. Just tell me if I'm waffling on, but you know
no, carry on.
You know there's a smartphone adapter from Peak, which they use it in Africa and various countries, so they do telemedicine. That was all driven by the fact that the chap who invented it, the ophthalmologist, he went to Kenya, I believe, and he couldn't believe that and I'll get the figures probably wrong here, but it was something like only 20 to 25% of that population had access to good eye healthcare, whereas over 80% had access to a mobile phone network and had a mobile phone. So
wow,
unbelievable. And that's how that whole peak system developed over the last 5 years. So over here again, most people have got in their pocket a device that is way beyond the tech of the Apollo mission, the Apollo 11 mission.
Yeah.
Is portable, and perhaps most importantly, they're not scared of it because they're used to it. There's no stigma attached to it. So I think the whole interest in this, the electronic aid development, is such that I'm absolutely reluctant for people to think of it as a specialism. And I can see our profession still being a little bit naughty, because you still see the odd published paper in referee journals talking about advanced electronic magnification devices and their potential usage in the visually impaired population. Whereas really, the textbooks should be focusing on how to advise a patient on what are the most appropriate apps and how the most appropriate currently available electronic aids and how best to use them. But have a look at any of the, I can think of three, have a look at any of the 3 textbooks published in the last 5 years on visual impairment, and find me more than 1 paragraph on electronic.
Yeah, they don't mention it.
I'll buy you a car.
Oh, nice. Unfortunately, I know that's a trick question. Yeah, that's the thing. I know. Obviously, most of the things that we spoke about there, obviously, people wanting to sort of read. How about things like writing? Like, is that something? Because again, it's a similar sort of thing. Is that some? I don't know what the right question is here.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I will. Really, this develops nicely in what we've just been saying. So, back to my mom and her rather Luddite views. I've set my mum up with a Kindle. Absolutely, she didn't bat an eyelid. But when I told her how to adjust the settings on her TV, and she's had a television for the last 40 or 50 years, her mind blurred over with technical overload. And yet I can load up a book on her Kindle from Bristol. She picks it up in Birmingham, set her up on Wi-Fi, and she knows how to adjust. So that's not an issue anymore. Now, that is primarily reading. One thing that I have learned recently, which I should have remembered, is that there's a difference between reading well or better with reduced vision by using something like an electronic device and actually enjoying the process of reading. So if you talk to anybody who uses, for example, a Kindle or a downloaded reading app or iReading app on a tablet, they'll say, yeah, I can read much better, but I still pick up my old dog-eared book and struggle with the light, because the physical process of having a book is what I really enjoyed in the old days. And I think that sort of links into what you're saying about writing, because I just assume that even like, I was so glad when keyboards took over, because my handwriting was notoriously difficult to read.
Me too.
Still on occasion, but it tends to be signatures and that's all. And then when you look at, so people, I'm sure people you're a lot younger, but my age and below are increasingly used to not physically writing too much. And so I thought that, in some ways that is a problem that is solving itself, because people increasingly used to touchscreens and keyboards. But like with the electronic books, I am not right there, because there are loads of instances where you want the flexibility of being able to write something. The flexibility of being able to personalize what you're doing rather than just keyboarded text. So I think it is still an issue. And I suppose that's where certainly some of the more dedicated electronic devices will allow you that provision. I mean, I have one of your excellent devices at the moment. Coincidence. You've heard me go on about the joys of a tablet, but there are ways of setting up a tablet. And I found, I think I told you, that little 15 quid clip-on bendy arm tablet holder that you can move into position, the camera on, and away you go. if you can adjust so I suppose what I'm saying is, I think writing is still in demand. It's still
Yep.
a visual disability, not being able to script write.
Yep.
I also toss into that there's more people than I ever imagined want to be able to read and write specialist scripts like music manuscripts and things. So I think there's often an adaptation beyond what you can do with most of the standard smartphones. So I think there's still a place for some of the more adaptable electronic devices. I think the nice thing about the dedicated devices is that they can be set up in advance by somebody else. So the onus on the user is less so. And then on top of that, you've got obviously the audio linkage as well. So
exactly,
I mentioned this to you before, but like my mum, I'll pay the extra £2 so she'll have an Audible, Amazon Audible link. So if she's tired, she can click that and the story carries on. But we've tried, for example, with some of our post-stroke patients. I've told you the seminar that they can read. The visual acuity is okay, but the visual association isn't. So they'll look at script. I can only read for 2 minutes or I get tired, or all the words are jumping around. But having an audio alongside your visualizing, complementing the two, actually helps those people who nominally got, in old-fashioned optometry, they've got great acuity, but you and I know that they can't read because the other is affected. So that sort of flexibility, I think, is still where some of the dedicated units will always beat what you can do yourself with some cheap ones.
I
don't know who's going to be watching this, but there's one thing that I absolutely would put out there. I don't think we can rely on our profession or the academics at the moment to be driving the use of electronic equipment for the sensorily impaired people. And I've learned more recently of patients than I have from my own research. And there's one thing that we're trying to get off the ground, but obviously things have been a little bit knocked into touch now. And that is of the, I think at the last count, something like 340,000 health-related apps available on iOS and Android. Now, a big chunk of those will be visually related. And new apps appear all the time, ones that basically do your vision for you, the tap-tap-see, to others that will enhance what you guys do. But they're constantly evolving and changing. And my current bee in my bonnet is if I had access to some gullible students, I'd give them this as a product. But if Optelec were to produce a weekly update on those apps that are currently available, I'd subscribe, and so would many other people. Because I hate being told by a patient that you've spent 10 minutes with, showing them what you think is the very best, latest way of getting magnification, which is for them to say, oh yeah, that was really nice. But look what my son showed me last week. Click on another button and it's better. So that has happened. So I think not you, because you're obviously involved in development and then producing some of the new kit. But I think as a clinician, I think there's a massive gap here for better education of the clinicians in the electronic stuff that's available. I mean, that stuff that we're going to do in Optician in the next month or two, the number of emails I've had requesting that, and it's just getting around to doing it. And I know that once we've run that, out of date fairly quickly. And so I think this is an area that a lot more thought needs to be put into. And a lot of the rehab colleagues, I'm sure they wouldn't kill me for saying this, I think we're all in this together. It's not as if it's just an Optom only problem. I think improved understanding and not making it a niche or specialist area, but a good dissemination of basic facts about how to adapt what you've got or how to employ a dedicated specialist device. It needs to be made more widely and easily known and available. I don't think the high street people are going to be that interested in picking up on it.
No. Well, this is the thing. I think it comes back to that thing of, well, you could use it for the same across so many things in life. It's kind of when the pain becomes too much, change happens kind of thing. And I think that's it. And we all know sort of with low vision patients, you've got some that are very kind of determined and they will they want to sort of learn how to use an illuminated magnifier or whatever, and they're willing to put the time in, and then others that aren't. But that's the thing, like you say, things are forever shifting, and obviously there's a massive push towards audio, so Alexas and Google Homes and all that kind of stuff. And again, I see opportunities there for companies, because obviously, I don't know whether you can actually say to something, say you've got an Audible account and you just say, hey, dingus kind of thing, read me War and Peace. I don't know whether that's possible, but that kind of thing, it's definite. I mean, and the thing is that kind of technology is already here, so it's just a matter of, like, as you just said there, it's kind of spreading the word and letting people know about it.
No, absolutely. And I think the pricing structure now is at the point now where I think it should be the next level. I mean, another nice example, my excellent wife and I were, I was somewhere, sat at a cafe somewhere, I think it was Rome. And there you go, showing off. And we saw a man that initially looked completely mad. And then as he got closer, you could actually tell he was quite severely visually impaired. But he was like muttering away and doing this. And as he got closer still, it was obvious he got one of those tiny little earbuds in. And he got it on GPS, so it was basically giving him, like sat nav for him to walk around.
Wow!
And with an accuracy that I know that was a year ago, and like we sort of both felt really guilty then for initially thinking it was a bit of a nutter. So I think what we've got at the moment with regard to this. Sorry for going off on one, but the fears of tracking and tracing at the moment about interfering with people's personal freedom and having a database held somewhere centralized that has details of where you've been and who you've met. That's understandably quite worrying. But to jump it back a little bit, in terms of sensory impairment and enhancements and replacement, I think that whole Wi-Fi and networked linkage is something that will increasingly be both available, and I suspect the main challenges are going to be either ethical or big brothery GDPR related. But I think the technology absolutely makes it possible. And voice recognition, are they secure systems? Well, at the moment, arguably not, because isn't it possible for someone on telly to say, Alexa, turn the telly off, and everybody's telly's turned off? But that's going to be a minor technical challenge, I think. But I think really we're at the stage now where it's people like your good self know the technology is there. What actually is it that people want? And I think we're almost at a stage where, we know that's out there, but who's going to want to use it, and what are the key things? That's why I love playing with the toys when you and some colleagues give the toys to play with. I think about the same time I last saw you, we had a autofocus by Optic, and it was only through feedback from the patient that we noticed that the autofocus did vary a little bit in light levels, and she often used to go to theatres and areas with lower light levels, and there was no sight shield, and she was quite corneal sensitive, so we were able to tell them to stick on some customized sight shields, and they were able to think about adapting the way the autofocus worked. So little things like that, you see, that is very individualistic, but I think the technology is flexible enough and cheap enough now to allow that little bit of individualization, rather than just have one set of one set of of generic hand magnifiers, and hope that because that's never has worked and never will work. I think what am I on about? I think personalization is possible with the new electronic gadgetry. And I think security and freedom of information are the challenges.
Would you imagine when you were at Aston that you would have been talking about this kind of stuff that relates to, I mean, generally, but I mean, relating to your career, it's crazy when you think about it. We're talking about voice activation and optical character recognition and
Look at us now. I mean, I remember in 2001 when I was a student thinking, as if you'd have video phones. Well, there you are, Mark, in your sauna. And
exactly.
I knew not to forget you, because unlike at 12 o'clock today, on my smartwatch.
Oh, wow.
I set a reminder to call Mark. Yeah, so it's all out there.
Yeah.
Without having to, to bring this back, almost predict the optical harm being a smaller and smaller part of people's management plans. I think there needs to be, oh, he's still there yet. There needs to be an increased focus on lighting and contrast, which has never been appropriately handled before. And I think the electronic age actually is going to make life in low vision practice so much easier.
Yeah.
But I think it does mean, multidisciplinary includes people like your good self as well. I don't think it should be just between two clinical and one social services person. I think the suppliers and the designers need to be involved in that process as well to help with that individualization. And I don't think cost should be prohibitive. I really don't. Yeah. When it is, I'm always suspicious.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, this is fine. I figured there was no point in putting too much structure into it. So, and I'm just curious, like, what was it that sort of made you want to go down this route of sort of optometry and eyes and so on and physics? What was this kind of draw originally?
Right, well, I suppose there are a number of things, and they're all quite obvious as well. I've always tended to the sort of the more hippie, left-wingy side of things. So I sort of stumbled via initially medicine into optometry with a vague view that I could help some people. But then I think you have to sort of focus on what you are good at. And, many people would argue very little, Harvey. I've always been told I talk a lot. So if there's
I wouldn't say that.
if there's any way I could talk a lot and thereby help people, fantastic. Which is exactly what a low vision practitioner should be, in my view. No, I think I wanted to do a clinical discipline, but I wanted to do a clinical discipline that was not overtly commercial, but was within my allowed skill set. And at the end of the day, I'm a bit of an anorak, so I've kept my hand in on the other side of the writing and the research paper type of thing. So yeah, it was. I don't think anyone fully achieves their lifelong goal that they develop when they're 8 years of age in a sort of
correct
Damascene blinding light. I think a lot of people sort of bumble through aimlessly. So I suppose I always preferred the sciences. I was always skeptical of the more spiritual aspects of life, and this was just challenging enough to allow enough challenge, but at the same time an outcome that's beneficial. And it's not always been easy because at the end of the day you still need to pay off mortgages and rents and things, so quite often you have to take the dirty hand of mammon. I suspect you're similar in a way, because you've always been on the wanting to help people scale, in my view.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's the thing for me. It's sort of a desire. I've always had an interest in sort of electronics and camera display technology type thing, and this thing of being able to kind of do that, sort of earn a living, and at the end of the day change people's lives. Because I know a lot of people in the industry kind of recognize this, and I think sometimes if I'm talking to sort of friends or people outside the industry, they maybe think it's a bit of an overstatement, but that's the thing. You know yourself, the number of people where you can see them and they've not been able to read for X number of years kind of thing, sometimes decades, and then you can just give them a piece of technology and all of a sudden, and it can be as simple. I was talking to a colleague the other day. He was talking about somebody they were completely blind. They could only see sort of shadows, but that had kind of diminished. And with a set of anti-glare shields, the shadows kind of came back. So it didn't give them their sight back, but it meant that they could see sort of bits of what was going on. And obviously that's a really cheap fix. And it can change people's lives. And you also mentioned earlier about things like music. Again, I'm not a musician, so it's hard for me to relate to, but obviously if people are wanting to say play the piano and they can't read, and there's tools out there that can enable them to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things I've tested yours on is I can't say no. I have a piano just over there, because that is one of the ones that that's one of the things that people assume they won't be able to do again. So, being able to magnify their script music. And I think you and I have discussed as well, again, electronically now, that should be possible to have an auto scan across, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's one of the ones that I'd say was one of the most common sort of teary moments where somebody quite openly says, I didn't think I'd ever be able to do that again. Similarly, it often just being told, I mean, the classic, macular degeneration, everyone's got macular degeneration. I'm well on the way to it with my risk factor list. But just being able to reassure somebody what actually is going on and what the most likely prognosis is, that creates a few tears in time, because a lot of people will say, well, no one's actually told me that before. I just thought I was going blind, or I was told that I was registrable now. And you can see people's total views on life absolutely changing just in the way that information has been given to them. And I think, it's a sad reflection, I think, at how, for all sorts of, in most cases, justifiable reasons, but often those points are missed. And usually the best person to decide on the most appropriate magnification, lighting, and adaptation is the person themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just with good information that they understand. I was just trying to think of my last few sort of, this one, tear-jerking moment. And
I'll get my tissues ready.
Well, you keep tissues in your shed. I keep that quiet, Mark. But, no, it was really lovely, and I don't think this is going to breach any confidentiality, so be careful. But it was it's a mitochondrial condition, and with a sort of, should we say, a finite prognosis, should we put it that way? So not too long left. But what she was actually most keen on was, she was really keen on that program First Dates, where they put people together. There's a French bloke with a bald head and a beard, and they team them up and they have dinner together and everything. And she just wanted to be able to read the bits at the end when they say they had 3 dates and they fell apart, or they had 2 dates and the bits at the end.
So
it was a dummy, and it was literally, we set up, there was a ptosis prop was involved, and a distance telescope and a readjust television, and she was able to see what happened at the end of First Dates for the few weeks she had left. And oh god, heartwarming. And what other job allows you to have that experience? It's really nice, really nice. Can you, that's not a woodpecker, by the way. I think my wife's doing DIY here, so I don't know.
No, that's fine. I was going to ask you if you got woodpeckers. Yeah, okay. It's your wife. You're not married to a woodpecker, are you?
No. It's an international supermodel, mate.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Excellent. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time, but thank you very much. I really, really appreciate this, because I know that's the thing. Everybody's busy. It's
always happy to help. Though often I always worry I'm not focused enough for these things. But your list was very vague, so
yeah.
But stay in touch, Mark. Stay safe.
And you.
I'll keep you posted about the excellent device. And July at some stage, we should be able to meet at the clinic. But I'll keep you posted. Everything's really up in the air still. All right.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Mark, thanks a lot.
Take care, man. Cheers.
Bye. Look after yourself. Bye-bye.
And you.